Hi, this is Rob Glass, Superintendent of Eastchester Schools, and I'm here with Cheryl Smith, the President of our Board of Education. We're here to talk a little bit today about a bond proposal for safety and security that is being considered for the March 24th, 2020 ballot. This is a $19.6 million proposal, and there's been quite a process that has gone into the making of this proposal. And we're here to kind of talk a little bit about it. And I'm wondering, Cheryl, if we could start by having you walk us through that process, which was already underway before I joined the district in July.
Sure, yes. It started really in earnest almost 2 years ago. So we've been talking about this since February or March of 2018. At that time, in response to the Parkland shooting, there was a lot of concern and interest in the community to talk more about the safety and security of our campuses and of our buildings. The board responded by creating a safety committee at that point. We had not had one prior to that. And beginning to meet with our consultants from Alteris, who we had been working with for a few years by that point on emergency plans for the district and on safety in the district. We started meeting with architects and construction firms, and we started meeting with Eastchester Police about the security of the buildings and how to make them more firm and secure. So soon after that safety committee was merged with the facilities committee, because we really were getting the message that one of the things we had to do was look at hardening our buildings to make them more secure and to bring them up to 21st century standards so that we could add the kinds of security features that a lot of buildings and districts are moving toward. And we have been meeting regularly since then. It's been a long process of gathering information, and in fact, a lot of meetings that Eastchester Police came to, they looked at what architects and construction firms were suggesting to us, and they helped us prioritize and figure out what was most important when we were having lockouts or lockdowns or different kinds of drills, what they were seeing in the building. Many of these consultants, the architects, the police, walked through the buildings along with Walter Moran, along with you and your team, along with Ed Keir and our facilities team, to really look at what was at stake. So it's been a long process, and that culminated in this fall with an advisory committee that was comprised of people from the administration, from the Board of Ed, from our community, from law enforcement, from construction firms, meeting together to look at the different plans that had been drawn up over this 18 months of information gathering, and to make recommendations about what they feel the community would be comfortable with and what the community would want. Because it really did start with community concern. The community brought this to the board and to the district, and we have been trying to respond to those concerns, and we wanted to make sure that the plans that were emerging we're speaking to the concerns that the community had, and we're answering those concerns.
Yeah, that's really good. I recall when I first came into the district and was getting up to speed on this whole issue, that was a very clear sense of mission from the board, that we needed to respond to these concerns that were raised by the community and really consider and make sure we gave the community some sort of opportunity to weigh in on our best thinking on this. Right. So you've been very committed to that, and that's been very clear to me as the new person on board. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and one of the things that came out at the board meeting last night, when I believe it was our Alteris representative was speaking, he talked about the importance of that this is any kind of hardening or security you're doing in kind of security response you're doing in the district has to be layered. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how this fits into a larger plan for safety and security in the district.
Yes, that's been something that you hear a lot. I've always heard that people say, you can't make anything perfectly secure, and so why make this investment? And what you learn from the experts is that it is a layered approach. I mean, the best approach we know is to start with a good, solid, social, emotional, feeling in your building, so that your students are getting attention in those regards, that it's a safe, secure place. And when things aren't going well for a particular student, or when you're seeing things that are students exhibiting behaviors that are of concern, that you have systems in place, right, for addressing that. So you're addressing the social, emotional needs proactively. We also, and I could see and do see that we have good evidence of that going on in our buildings. We have a lot of those programs in place, and we're adding more. It's always about having a coherent system, and that's where the ongoing work is. So we have those things in place. We have really good supports. We have, hired extra counselors, an extra phys ed teacher to kind of, teach some of these wellness and social emotional skills. We're adding programs like Second Steps coming in, and so a lot of things that we're doing. We also have really good plans for the actual safety and security procedures, the drills, the all of those things are drilled and practiced, and every time we debrief on those to improve. So this idea of layering is that, if you can head things off before they become issues from the inside with students, that's the best. That's the most important. But sometimes a threat comes from outside. Sometimes a threat comes from somewhere where you don't see it. And when it does, can you be prepared to buy yourself a little time to get everybody into a secure place in the building and be safe until the police can, address that threat? So this concept of layering is you want to have all your bases covered so that wherever something emerges, you're ahead of it. And if you find yourself not ahead of it, you have a means to address it and keep everybody safe so that you minimize the harm that can be done by an intruder or any kind of a threat. So what we realized, and as you know, our buildings they've been around a long time, from the 20s and the 50s. And so there are real limitations. Those buildings weren't designed for this kind of work. So in order to address it, to make this layering complete, we really have to begin to address some of those things. I have to say just one last anecdote on this thought that, even when we release people from a lockdown situation, we have a lot of keys on that custodial ring. They have to be released from those buildings, and it looks like hundreds of keys on this ring. It's just the function of age and the function of a lot of change over the decades, where a lot of different lock systems and technologies get layered on top of one another. So, by addressing that with some modern technology, we really can be much more efficient, much more secure.
Right. So you're saying that so many of our windows and doors, for instance, are outdated. So in order to apply some of the new safety and security measures that are available that districts are adapting, we actually need to replace that infrastructure first, and then we can layer on the kinds of safety and security measures that are seen as most effective in schools today.
Yeah, that's correct. I think that was, I noticed that coming into this midway through, that one of the things we were all wrestling with is to address the safety and security, you first have to address some things that are really, functions of doors, like are the doors able to withstand certain things? Can you put some blast film over a window? But if that window isn't designed to function with that film, then you need to replace the window. Is it worth putting an investment into a window that you're going to eventually have to replace in 5 or 10 years because it really shouldn't be replaced today? So wanting this to be a safety and security related bond did bleed into some elements of what would be a traditional bond for infrastructure. And we tried to draw really clear lines, where we needed to address the infrastructure to address safety, we did. But where we didn't need to add things, and we didn't, right? And I think that was not easy to separate those two things because they're really intertwined.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think it took us a while to understand that also, as a board and as a safety and facilities committee, how much of this, had to be replacing existing infrastructure in order to apply the sorts of things that we felt would be most effective in securing the buildings and helping to make the staff and the students inside those buildings feel secure so that they can get on with the important work of education.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I wanted to just, second what you had to say about the sorts of steps that the district has been taking that I've seen the district take over the last 3 to 4 years in terms of really trying to create an articulated sort of curriculum for wellness, for mindfulness, and for mental health in the district through the additional hires in guidance and also in physical education. And I think there has been huge strides toward that from K-12 to really get students thinking about the importance of this sense of wellness in the schools. Did you want to say anything more about Second Steps, which you mentioned? What is that?
It's it's simply a program of many lessons. It's a curriculum for teaching students how to deal with challenges that they may face. So, for example, many of our elementary students may find themselves on the playground in a situation where they're feeling frustrated because they can't, for one reason or another, the actions of another student or whatever they're going through. And to give them tools and language to recognize what they're feeling and tools to positive ways of grappling with it. So it will teach coping strategies. It will teach them to feel when they feel anxiety, what that feels like, and how to recognize it themselves. And then how they can self-regulate. What are 3 things that you can do when you're feeling this way? When you're trying to resolve conflict, can you name it? What's the source of it? What are the steps you take? And the nice thing is once we have a common language and that gets routinized, it's like 10 minutes a day in each classroom, usually at the morning meeting, or sometime that, and everybody's getting the same message. So then you have a synergistic effect, and families can learn that language and understand what we're doing. Now we're just getting started with it. We have it in some spots in our district, but we're going to move it through. But those are examples of the kind of lessons I've seen these work in other districts, and even in my previous district, we watched discipline referrals go down. We watched pro-social behaviors go up. There was data to support that these kind of things work. So we have so much going on. We've actually cataloged all of it, but we were trying to systematize it more and decide what's the thing that everyone's going to get, And then the other thing I think we have to work on too is just do we have a very systematic way of recognizing when someone is in distress, and how do we have an objective way to determine if a student might be on a trajectory to cause harm, and how do we cope with that? How do we get service? How do we address it? We do that now, but I'd say there's room for growth in how proficient we become, and then there's some national models for just making that a little bit tighter. And Alteris is actually reaching out to us to actually begin that training with us.
That's great.
So, kudos to the district for securing a firm like Alteris to consult with us, because we're not wondering about what is best practice. We actually have someone advising us on best practice and maybe keeping us from making some decisions at some point that we think are good, but maybe aren't as good as we think. And to have that resource is an enormous benefit for our students and faculty.
I mean, I think it is really important to think about the extent to which this bond and the proposal, which is an expense. We are asking the community to commit to a pretty big bond. So it's happening within a larger culture, and we're really trying to change the culture and respond to how socially things have been changing in the last couple of decades. And the reality for our students and teachers working in schools feels very different from when many of us were elementary school students and we were not going through lockdown drills. I think the reality in the buildings is different. We're having a culture shift. We're trying to respond on many levels, and that, securing our older buildings as effectively as we can is really an important part of that.
It really is. And as you mentioned, I think it's important to recognize this is a big ask of our community. It is $19.6 million. If our buildings had been, a little more modern to begin with, we may not have had to invest quite so much. But you can't, like using the windows as an example, instead of just treating a window, you end up needing to replace the window. And Ed Keir, our facilities leader, he's done a complete analysis, as you know, and we have a lot of work that our buildings are going to need over the next decade. The good news is some of this addresses some of that. Some of that, this is already, part of that analysis that he's done. So we'll be moving significantly in a direction of addressing some of the facility needs we have, at least as they intersect safety. And this is going to be really good for the district. It really is going to help us a lot. So it's important to give the community a chance to weigh in on this, and that's our intent. And I think you've done a really great job as a board keeping this front and center in your priorities, and you really should be commended. The community needs to know you've done a great job with this.
Well, thank you. And I think that the district has, and your office and the administration has done a really important work this year with making sure that the community has been involved in the discussion starting in the fall. And I think we are all really, really committed to openness and transparency about this. We want people to know what we're doing, why we're proposing this, why we think this is a good idea, what we could do better, what we are continuing to work on improving. So I think it's been a really effective collaboration. So thank you too.
Yeah, you're welcome, and I appreciate your partnership in this and the community's partnership certainly with this. So along that line, how can the community get some more information as this progresses? If this goes toward a ballot, what do you envision happening, and what do you think our steps will be?
Well, I mean, it will go to, we will discuss it at our next board meeting, which is on February 5th or 4th. February 4th, right? So Tuesday, February 4th, we will meet and we'll be discussing this further. And at that point, we would need to take a vote on whether or not we're going to put the referendum forward. The language will be crafted for the referendum, and we will make sure to be circulating this language. We will be sure to be circulating FAQs and questions that people have, and our answers to those questions widely. So we would be looking for newsletters, right, coming out in the mail. We'd be looking for posting things up on our district website, having a lot of information in as many channels as possible. I personally would invite the community, if they have questions or concerns, to email the Board of Ed mailbox, and I'll be checking it regularly, as I know you will, to make sure that any questions that are posed there will be included in any further discussion, because we want to make sure we're answering the questions and concerns that the community has. The community can look forward to information sessions coming up beginning in February and going into March, I believe, right?
Yes.
And those dates were tentative dates were already circulated in a letter that went out from the district office and from the Board of Ed last week to everyone in the community. We'll be again advertising those dates and any updates to the dates and times and locations widely, and hope that we would get lots of people to come out and tell us, not only ask questions, but tell us what they believe and how they feel about the proposals that are being put forward. So that if there are any concerns, if there's support, if there's questions, we can share that as publicly as possible. We want to know where the community stands on this, because this really is, it started with the community. And we want to make sure that it never gets away from the will of the community and what they want for our schools.
That's the way it's supposed to be, and that's the way we intend to work hard to keep it.
Yeah.
So thank you for pointing that out. Well, I think we've covered the waterfront pretty thoroughly with this one. I think we've covered a lot of topics related to this bond, and certainly more will be unfolding as we move forward. But I want to thank you, Cheryl, for your leadership on the board, for your thoughtful leadership and commitment to the way that you've operated this process from the beginning, you and our board colleagues. And I want to invite anyone who has continued questions to follow the process that Cheryl outlined about staying informed. Certainly our website's a great place to start. But again, thank you, Cheryl, for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us.